It's the spring of 2013. There is vibrancy in the air. There is fertility. There are new ideas. There's innovation in the air. And we are going to be talking to a lot of very interesting people, some of them entrepreneurs or counselors and guides involved in the entrepreneurial ecosystem here in Omaha, Nebraska. But I have a very special guest to lead off my show today. Welcome to WOWBIZ Weekly. I'm Lynn Hinderaker, and you're watching WOWBIZTV.com. You're also watching YouTube and the WOWBIZ TV channel on YouTube, either one of those, and you'll get a good sense of what the new frontier in news, business news, journalism, digital media, and most importantly, relationship building and business networking right here at Creighton University in the Hickson Lead Auditorium in the Harper Center. It's a wonderful day. Thanks for joining me. My first guest, very interesting lady. She's one of the we'll quote, leaders here in the local community. She comes from the nonprofit sector. And our conversation today is catalyzed, kind of stimulated by a book that was written recently by the CEO of Facebook. And a very controversial book, has some great points. So please welcome my very special guest, Creighton students, executives, Miss Michelle Zych, everybody, right now. Yeah! How do you like that? Great. Have a seat.
Thanks.
Thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
I'm so lucky to have connected to you. You know, you and I, we've never really come across each other.
No, we haven't.
It's a very good thing and lucky for me. Well, listen, there's this book. You want to hold this up so that Zach, our production person, it's kind of a glossy surface here. The name of this book is Lean In. Mm-hmm. And the author, again, why don't you say her name?
Her name is Sheryl Sandberg, and she's actually the COO of Facebook. Okay. So she's written this really powerful book that's really gotten the conversation going again about women in leadership.
Yes, yes. And that conversation had kind of gotten into kind of just a trough, or just kind of been floating along for a while.
I think nationally or publicly it had, but we're still having that conversation on an individual basis, on a community basis. And so she's really given some thought to it and given it a platform again.
New energy, no doubt about it. Now, the name of the book is Lean In, and I guess the presumption of the book, the fundamental presumption, is that if women, and by the way, minorities of both genders, all right, that's kind of woven into the book.
Absolutely.
Had been allowed to be as productive as they are capable of being. I'm going to carefully state that premise. That the productivity of our economy would have increased, I want to say 15%, I think was the number, which is huge on a macro scale. Yeah. Do you fundamentally agree with that?
I do. I think that kind of the preface of her book is having the opportunity to lean in and taking opportunities that are presented to you.
Yes.
What she really talks about is internal factors that women kind of need to get over and push past in order to attain leadership positions.
Right. So is it's a self-image and an identity thing, or is it a lifestyle thing, or is it a socioeconomic thing? Are the barriers primarily psychological, Michelle?
I think it's both. I think it's internal and it's external. She's really focusing on the internal barriers. The idea specifically when you talk about women in leadership, families come into play. Whether or not I want to have a child, that's going to really impact kind of my ability to work long hours.
And is there presumption that, that we can work over that or ignore that, or that's really not a big deal? I mean, it's a factor, right?
It is a factor, but the deal is that unfortunately it just becomes a factor for women. It should also be a factor for men, and that was one of the greatest things about the book to me is the idea is as much as women need to lean in at the office, men need to lean in, partners need to lean in at home, and really talking about the compromise of what it takes to have a successful family and a successful career is about partnership. And so she really talks about choosing the right partner of who you want to spend your life with, who you want to build a life and a family with.
And who you can depend upon to do the dishes or the laundry or take the kids to school after a
And the other thing is recognizing that sometimes the dishes aren't going to get done. What's the most important thing? Sometimes the dishes do need to get done, but sometimes you need to work late and you need to get ready for a meeting. So it's kind of a cycle, and I think it's really interesting that she kind of points those cycles out.
Now, that doesn't seem to me to be particularly new information. I mean, we all know that we got to struggle with this in our marriages and our lifestyles, especially. What is new about this? What is her point of view? Is it the statistics behind it, or is she just simply intensifying and focusing on this a little bit more and saying, hey, let's relook at this again?
I think it's a little bit of both. There's a ton of statistics in there. If you look at the back, there are so many studies to read, and so that to me really makes it interesting. That's something that we do at the Women's Fund, is really focus on research to support our efforts. So I think it's a little bit of that, but it's also just giving fresh eyes to this conversation that it needs to happen.
Yeah.
Women are not represented well in leadership positions, not necessarily nationally or here locally.
Now let's, as we kind of come towards the back end of this interview, let's pretend that we have some male executives sitting here, and let's pretend. We don't really have to pretend, do we? And let's pretend that they are here and they've decided to be very transparent and as sincere as possible. All right? And what would they say about, obviously we're generalizing here, but what would they say about women's participation and contribution in the executive level and at the executive environment? Would they criticize any particular thing in a general way? Would they speak to things they don't understand, whether it's maybe women's ability to think about a broader variety and be less focused? And you know, I actually give a speech about this occasionally, about strategy and how women have the ability to consider a broader and more holistic consideration set, where men are very, very linear and have a tendency to be very, very focused. And they think that's the right way to do things. It may or may not be, depending on the industry and all that. Yeah. What do you think they would say about Lean In and her basic assertion?
Well, I'm not a male executive, so I can't speak for them. But what I think is that it's just as in any piece of leadership, is that you, as an executive, I want to know that my team is not only prepared, I want to know that they are thinking of the big picture, that they're focused on their role and their job. But I also want to know that their work-life balance is somewhat in check, so that they are happy when they come to work, because we know that leads to more productivity.
Great.
What I would also want to know as an executive is that research supports diversity in teams, whether it's leadership teams or corporate boards.
It does.
You become more successful.
It does.
Because
especially if creativity and innovation is part of your strategic set.
Absolutely.
The more diverse the viewpoints at the table, the more fertile, to use a word I used at the beginning of the show, your overall viewpoint and product or service offering is.
And we have different strengths, and that's a great thing. And so the more that we can build diverse teams, the more successful business is going to be. And the research supports that.
Yeah, it really does.
It supports not only that your business is going to be successful, but that your community is going to be successful.
Absolutely.
That you're going to be able to give back more, and that's something that's very important in order for us to succeed as a community.
Yeah, that's the overarching point of view.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. All right, so we've got this book, Lean In. We have Michelle Zych, and now we understand, are prepared to move forward and go to the next level in terms of our awareness and understanding of this important strategic factor. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Female leadership, Lean In. We'll be right back from WOWBIZ Weekly. Thank you so much. Excellent.